It's the most magical time of the year, and I'm not talking about Christmas. I'm talking about the NFL season. So make sure you're ready with NFL Sunday Ticket and YouTube TV. Get the most live NFL games all in one place. Right now, you can save $85 when you bundle NFL Sunday Ticket with YouTube TV. Sign up today at youtubetv.com/Spotify. Device and content restrictions apply. Discount applied to first 4 months of YouTube TV, then $72.99 a month. Ends August 29th. Terms, restrictions, and embargoes apply. No refunds.
It can get lonely climbing Mount McKinley, so to entertain myself, I go to ChumbaCasino.com. At Chumba Casino, I can play hundreds of online casino-style games for free, like online slots, bingo, Slingo, and more. Plus, I get a daily login bonus. It's just too bad that up here, I don't have anyone to share my excitement with. Woohoo!
Live the Chumba life. Anytime, anywhere. Play for free now at ChumbaCasino.com. VGW Group. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
We may live over 5,000 miles from Lincoln Financial Field, but what we lack in proximity we make up for in the film study, and each and every week this offseason, we will be bringing you breakdowns loosely related on film study from across the pond and the Sooner State. I'm your host, Shane Haff. You can follow me on Twitter at ShaneHaffNFL, and I am flying solo on this introduction to the podcast because I'm introducing a segment we recorded all at once, and I'm splitting it up in production here, but we're going to throw to a mailbag segment. This will be the last off-season piece of content that you have from us, because next week we'll be back breaking down film from week 1 of the preseason. And so be sure you check that out. Be sure you're subscribed. Without any further ado, let's throw over to that conversation. We put out a mailbag request to our Patreon members, and then we also put it out on Twitter. Reminder, you can check out our Patreon at patreon.com/ontheshane page, and we've got some perks that will kick in the season. You get an ad-free podcast feed for our show, so you don't get the ads that are in the regular show. You get access to a Discord where you can just chat with us about football, different things. You get access to these mailbag podcasts once they go behind that paywall. They are currently not, but they will later in the season. You also get to help. You get a little bit of creative control over our film study, because we've talked about, you cannot watch every player when you're watching all 22. And so we'll put up weekly polls for player spotlights, guys that you want us to specifically focus on our all 22 reviews. You also have that direct line to us to suggest show ideas and things like that. And we can build it out with some more additional content that you guys like. So you can check that out. There's a $3 and a $5 a month tier. We certainly appreciate your support there. But without any more salesmanship, let's dive into the mailbag collection or questions that we collected. Our first question came from a guy that's in the chat right now, Eagles Eric. He asked, do you think Pistol will be featured more this year? And I'll take this one first. I'm just going to say yes. In 2023, the Eagles were in shotgun on 87% of their offensive snaps, and that's with a lot of tush pushes. In pistol, they were in pistol on 7% of their snaps, and their pass rate over expectation was negative 18.4%. So when they were in pistol, it was to run. You look at the Chargers last year, and they were in pistol about the same amount of the time, but they were under center on 21% of their snaps. And I don't think you're going to suddenly see Jalen Hurts under center a lot. For a lot of reasons. One, he's never done it. Pistol is still like a similar drop process for him. And number two, being under center as a mobile quarterback sort of nerfs your run ability a bit. I think pistol feels like a nice compromise where you can still get the play action boot rollouts, but you can still also run like read option sorts of things out of the pistol. So I do think you're going to see pistol. I think you'll see a little under center, but I don't think it's going to be a ton. I think you'll primarily see like pistol as a replacement for under center.
Yeah, we will try, and we said off air, we'll try and be quick with the questions, but then some of them are going to be a little bit more detailed than others, and this is a good one, especially as it's a little bit more schematic, so we'll be a little bit more detailed. 100% agree. I think it's almost a dead cert that we'll see more pistol. Pistol basically combines the two, and you pretty much summed it perfectly, Shane. There was actually a clip going around on Twitter that I posted the other day of Jalen Hurts mic'd up, and if you watched it, I think about minute 2:51, there is literally pistol play action. And it basically means Hurts still has to turn his back to the defense. He still has to run that boot action. But you basically get the benefit of doing that, but still keeping things a little bit more comfortable for Jalen Hurts. It's almost like the perfect blend of Stoutland and Moore's run game is to run more pistol, because Moore wants to run more under center. Stoutland wants to keep it shotgun based. Well, if you've got two people that have differing ideologies in the room at once, try and find some common ground, and pistol is that common ground. So I think we'll almost certainly see some more. Moving on to the second question, I'll ask of you as well, Shane. I see we've got in front of you. You just have a brackets here, Shane. I should have asked you from Daniel. Is this from Twitter or is this from elsewhere?
I don't remember. I don't remember if it came from Twitter or Patreon, but I did try to include names where I thought about it.
Yeah, I should have mentioned actually down the whole salesmanship route. Yeah, please do. $3 a month is not much for Patreon. I know it's very hard. I subscribe to a fair few Patreons myself, and I know it's not easy because there's hundreds out there. But it is good. Discord is good. We had a few people asking us about where to learn a lot of schematic things the other day. We were in the chat giving loads of advice, and it's the easiest way if you want to just have a conversation with us, basically. So anyway, Daniel asked, how would you feel about Jeremiah Trotter getting some legit playing time this season? And I'll go first. I would feel very good about it because I have been a big sort of fan of Trotter. I think he's pretty much plug and play ready. I think if you're happy with the size and you think he can play, then do I think he'll be brilliant? Absolutely not, because it's the Eagles and linebackers and we're destined to fail. But do I think he should be a sort of capable starter? I mean, if Zach Bourne's out there starting at the moment, I see no reason why Jeremiah Trotter Jr. could not overtake Bourne as the season goes along, especially if it feels like the Kobe Dean is maybe out of favour. I do not see him replacing Devin White at all. I think White will play all season long. He's been signed. The Eagles knew what they were getting with Devin White when they signed him, so that shouldn't surprise him if he has a few bad games. But I do think Jeremiah Trotter could absolutely get some legit playing time this year. I think he's pretty much pro-ready, I think. How about you, Shane? Do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I agree with that. If we see him play, I hope it's because he's playing really well, not because Zach Bond is playing really poorly. But Zach Bond is making that transition from edge rusher to linebacker, and so we'll see how that goes. We'll see how much he's blitzing while we've got an edge dropping out. Of course, Devin White's a good blitzer. I think all three of these guys are good blitzers. So I mean, I'd like to see the rookie go win a job. We'll see, though. I agree a little bit with Mr. Crockpot here that if he's getting on the field early, it probably indicates trouble, whether it be injury or somebody like Zach Bond performing really poorly. But, from a cognitive standpoint, Trotter Jr. should be ready to go. It's just concerns about size, really, for me with him.
Yep, I'm the same. Right, do you want to move on? Do you want to take the next one?
Yes, so question number 3 came from Jackrabbit Rocks on Twitter and asked, is it possible the reason we're seeing the offense dominate in training camp is that Fangio's scheme is complicated and the kids are still learning? I would say, generally speaking, I think the offense is always an advantage in training camp, especially when the Eagles, even in padded practices, aren't doing live tackling. And so I think the offense operates at an advantage there. A lot of the stats that you'll see come from 7-on-7 where there's not necessarily a big pass rush, or from you see the one-on-one drills where a receiver should beat a cornerback, 70% of the time in one-on-ones because they know their route. The defender doesn't. They have no help. So I think offense is generally at an advantage. I don't think the complexity of the scheme is so much the issue because the Eagles have run a Fangio-based system the last 2 years. The rules are largely the same. But I will say that I think it has more to do with the offense bringing back every starter except Jason Kelce and Quez Watkins, which, let's be honest, was an addition by subtraction situation. While the defense is replacing both linebackers, they're replacing Fletcher Cox, replacing Hassan Reddick, they're replacing 2 cornerbacks, and they're replacing a safety. And so there's been a lot more turnover at defense. You got a lot of young guys out there and a lot of new faces, and there's a little more volatility there. So I think it's both of those things working in the offense's favor.
Oh, man, I actually prepped for this show, Shane, and I wrote down everything you just said to answer this question. You basically took the words out of my mouth about the stars coming back and about it's not the scheme that's complicated, it's the new players, that it's relationships, it's rookies in the secondary. So I haven't really got a great deal to add. The only thing I would say is I think defense in football is heavily reliant on aggression as well and physicality. Flying to the football, tough defense. Like, you can't do that in training camp. Like, you can show a little bit of aggression, but you can't really. Offenses are designed to win in training camp. And if an offense is not having a good training camp, I always care a lot more than a defense. Moving on to question 4, we sort of mentioned this already, so I'll probably keep it quick. It's from JC. How worried should we be about right guard? And what are the chances Harry will make a move before week 1? I think we've already answered that. I feel like on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm sort of edging towards a 6 and a 7. I'm a little bit worried about right guard, but I have said in the past that I feel like if you've got Lane Johnson there and you've got Cam Jurgens there, I'm not too worried about it, because I think you can make do with one sort of average starter. I think the chances of a move before week 1, I would be surprised personally. I think they've got enough there to get by, unless there's like a massive injury bug. I think if you have to play, I mean, at the end of the day, if they sign Becton and they're giving him reps there, they obviously think he can do it. I think you've got Cam Jurgens, then you've got Matt Hennessy, who you could even play at centre and move Jurgens back to right guard if you really wanted. And lastly, you have, who have I not mentioned? Trevor Keegan. Did I forget someone as well? Yeah, Trevor Keegan I didn't mention. So you got like 4 guys there. So I think it's unlikely they make a move for a guard. If there's like a vet laying out there and Steen's injury is more serious than we think, then maybe. But I highly doubt that. That's before week 1. I expect that will come like in the season if there's an injury. What about you?
Yeah, I'm not worried. It is a weak spot. But at the end of the day, I've said this before, but Eagles fans are really hyper-focused on their team. And every team's like this, and they just think, oh man, we don't have a right guard. And if that's your biggest problem as an offense, is who's going to play right guard next to your Hall of Fame right tackle, you're in a pretty good spot, because most teams have major question marks at multiple spots on their offensive line. They also don't have a wide receiver duo as good as AJ and Devontae. They don't have a running back like Saquon Barkley. There's a lot of teams with big quarterback questions. And so, at the end of the day, is it a weak spot? Yes. Am I worried about it? I wouldn't say I'm worried about it. I mean, if you tell me that the Eagles go into Brazil week 1 and they just get blown up by the defense, and you ask me what happened, I would guess the offensive line was the issue, right? I mean, it is the weak spot, but it's not something I'm overly concerned about.
Yep, I would agree. Before you go to question 5, Shane, just very quickly, nice little selfish question from Mr. Crockpot just for me, asking me about like my plans this year in terms of writing. Yeah, it'll be the same as always. I'll do a Twitter thread, hopefully the day after the game and 2 days after the game, and I will be writing for Bleeding Green Nation unless BOG doesn't like my work anymore. As far as I'm aware, I'm still writing there, so I'll be writing weekly offense and defensive breakdowns after every single game. So yeah, they'll be the same as usual, basically. Right. I'll take. I really
like the sweet graphics you include in those too. Those are really nice.
Yeah, there we go. Basically, anything I do that's not a dodgy film filmed on my phone from Twitter is from Shane, because time is of the essence, especially with the amount of work I do. So I'm not into the fancy graphics. Anything that has any sort of any element of time that's not just watching the film, it will come from Shane and not from me. Right. Let's go again. Question 5 from Scott. We actually sort of answered this at the start as well, very briefly. What's your take on the training camps reports about Jalen's performance? Well, obviously it's historic. I mean, it's nearly historic. So as we know, MVP incoming, Super Bowl, breaking records because he doesn't throw any interceptions. And he says, is there some element of the coach is giving him easy routes, relying less on his decision making? I mean, second half of the question, Scott, I mean, being honest, without being there, we've got no idea, but I've not seen any coaches mention it being a safe or conservative offense. In fact, Elliot Shaw-Parks has spoken about the fact that while he's been judging him in terms of like his interception, he's mentioned he hasn't just been checking it down. It's not just been screens. It's been a lot down the field. We've seen some clips of down the field throws as well. So my take on it is that he's playing well. Like, I don't want to get too detailed into it because I haven't seen it yet, but the take on it is, I think it's been about as positive as you can hope. From everything I read, it seems like he has got the offense and he's understanding what Kellen Moore wants to do. And that is huge, because I think it's going to be a very different offense and it's one he's not used to. So my take on the training camp reports are, I'm very, very pleasantly happy about them, because my big concern going in this year was, would Jalen Hurts sort of adjust well to Kellen Moore being the OC and a bit more of a complicated offense. And who knows what the actual offense is because we haven't seen it. Maybe it is a very simplified Kellen Moore scheme because he knows he doesn't need to be as good schematically because he's got an elite tight end and 2 elite receivers, an elite quarterback and elite running back. So maybe it is a simple scheme. Essentially running it very well. What about you, Shane?
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, obviously not being there, I can't imagine it's relying less on decision-making than last year because so much of the decision-making last year was a binary. Is A.J. Brown one-on-one, do this? Is he not? Do that? Like, there wasn't a lot of progression things happening. And from everything I know of Moore, I expect a more complex offense this year. As for why it's been good, without having been there, all I can rely on is like what BLG said and what he's written in his practice reports, that he's just looked really good. So, it's encouraging. And then again, the aforementioned comments about what training camp actually means, I don't put a ton of stock into it, but I would rather him look good than bad for sure.
Yep, I'm with you. I agree. Should we move on?
Let's do it. The next question came to us from Scratch03 on Twitter. It said, with Nakobe Dean being touted as a stud coming out of college, why do you think he's been struggling to take hold of the starting linebacker position? Also, who is the dark horse, quote, breakout star no one is talking about? I would say on the Nakobe Dean part, the biggest issues are just that he hasn't been able to stay healthy, and which was obviously a concern because he fell to the first round after he was given, or excuse me, he fell to the third round when most guys had a first round grade on him. And then he's just very small, 5th percentile height, 14th percentile weight. I think that was always going to be a bit of a struggle to adjust. It's the same concerns about Trotter, by the way, with his size. And football is a sport where, sometimes we make football too complicated. Big people beat up little people, and little people tend to get hurt. And so I don't know that I can judge much else about Nakobe Dean because we simply haven't seen him play much. And so I can't give a lot of feedback on this is why he's struggled, other than he's just been hurt. And so it's been hard to rely on him.
Yeah, and before I answer on Dean, Shane, do you want to give a quick shout out? Do you have a breakout star no one's talking about?
These 2 questions in one get me because I forgot to even think about that one.
Do you want me to answer and I'll come back to you?
Do it. I'll have one by the time you get done.
Right, there you go. You got about 30 seconds to think of a breakout star, no pressure. I actually went back because this question looked at my Nakobe Dean scouting report, and I sort of hoped that when I wrote about him, I was like, I wasn't the biggest fan, so I could come on here and say, you see, you should have watched his college film closely, but I would be lying because it turns out I really liked his college film. I'll give you a quick summary that I said when I sort of wrote. I always do like an overall summary at the end. I said I expected him to be good, but I thought he was better than I expected him to be when I watched him more closely. I said I've absolutely no doubt there are legitimate injury concerns that have caused him to fall. And I did say I think there are concerns over his size, his tackling, and his ability to cover tight ends down the seam, considering his size. And this probably caused him to fall out of the first round. This is something BLG has mentioned in training camp about his coverage being an issue. I mentioned his athleticism, but I did mention as well, although he struggled in man coverage, he looked good in coverage at times. Excellent blitzer, excellent against the run. But I kept saying here, and I literally sit here, I think Dean should be a full-time starter, and this is quote, and if his body holds up, I think the Eagles have got themselves a steal on in round 3. But I think you can see me talking about here, the injury concerns have been a problem. And it's a really boring excuse to talk about why a player didn't make it. But injuries are massive. You just don't get the reps you need. Linebacker in particular, it's an instinctive position. And if you're not playing consistently, you're just not flipping. And I think that's why I just can't have... I worry about the Nakobe Dean long term. And before I give you your shade, my breakout star, I'm going to go Milton Williams. I think Milton Williams, to maybe scheme guys, is someone that they already think is really good. To film nerds, they already like him. But I think the general consensus, maybe the national media, hasn't bought on. I think Milton Williams could go nuts this year. I think he could have a really, really good year. I think he's an extremely good player. And I think the fact that Fangio came out this week and said that he tried to trade for him with the Dolphins is a great sign, because that shows that Fangio's on board. He obviously thinks he's a perfect fit for that sort of 4-5 technique role as well. Or a free technique as well. So I think he's going to have a really, really good year. Now you've had a minute to think. Go on then, give us your heavily anticipated breakout player that you've had 1 minute to think about, Shane?
I'll go with Zach Bond. I think he's the guy that Fangio. He was a Fangio guy, like that. Fangio wanted Zach Bond. There's some comparisons, height, size, athletic profile wise, to Andrew Van Ginkel, who had a breakout last year for the Dolphins under Vic Fangio. So I'll say Zach Bond has a good year, is the quote-unquote breakout star that nobody's talking about much.
That's impressive, Shane, that you managed to spend a minute thinking and just steal Mr. Crockpot's answer from the chat room. So if you didn't see Mr. Crockpot, you can use that against him now in your fellow conversations because you just managed to steal an answer. So we now know that Shane can read the chat. So great breakout star there. Moving on, this one of those like fantasy questions, I guess. How do you think running back rotation will look and roles will look from Bang Bang Bird Gang? Lovely name. I think Saquon Barkley. I think the Eagles basically, as a franchise, believe in a running back by committee, but I think you just spent a lot of money on Saquon Barkley and you're going to run him into the ground for 2 years because he's an elite running back. So I think if Barkley's healthy, you're going to give him, I don't know, 75, 80% of the touches. Is that too high? But I think he could really be like a workhorse back because I don't care if you believe in a committee. He's a star running back. And the Eagles historically might believe in committees, but they've also never paid a top 5 running back in the NFL. So I think Barkley will take a lot. I think Gainwell will just about edge running back 2. I think Gainwell will out-snap Will Shipley, but I think Gainwell will out-carry Shipley, whereas I think Shipley might have more receiving yards than Gainwell. That would be what I think. But I think you could be looking at like a 70, maybe even as high as like a 75%, maybe like volume to Barkley. What about you, Shane? Am I going too high there?
I had like 70 in mind. I think so. Saquon's your 3-down back. I think Gainwell will spell Saquon and be used in 2-minute situations because we've seen over the years that the Eagles like to use him in 2-minute drill situations. And I think Shipley gets very limited reps. I think Shipley might end up being your kick returner. You can file that away. But I don't expect to see Shipley a lot, especially early in the year. Now, as the year goes on, maybe he proves himself as a pass protector. Not that Gainwell is great at that, and you start to see him a little more. But that's kind of how I see it shaking out.
Yep, fair enough. Let's move on. Let's get through these, and then we'll get to some more random ones to finish off. I like the mailbag because I feel like you could just hear a lot of takes in one because we like to waffle. This is a very broad question, so I'm going to try and answer it as concisely as I can. What's the concern with the Eagles roster or staff going into the season? From @BKN_says. Shane, I've answered the first one, so I'll let you start with this one. Concern with roster or staff? Take a pick. You can do one or both, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think the obvious concern points, we've mentioned right guard before. I think that's a place that you could convince yourself the Eagles are going to have problems. You could convince yourself that depth could be an issue in a few places. You know, if A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith goes down, where are you at receiver? If Dallas Goedert goes down, where are you at tight end? Of course, every team has these problems, but again, we're more in tune with those issues for our own teams. If you look at defensive tackle, if Jalen Carter or Jordan Davis were to go down, where are you at as a defensive line? So I think there's concerns there, but if you stay away from depth, I would just say the general changing pieces in the secondary for a defense that we did mention before is complex. There's a lot of coverage rules, and you're changing out one of your starting safeties, you're changing out 2 starting cornerbacks, you're changing out all your linebackers. So I would say the back end of the defense and that right guard spot, I guess, are probably the places that you should have concern.
Yep, love it. I will go for, seeing as you did roster, I'll look at staff instead. How do I say this nicely? I'm a little bit concerned about Fangio still. Like, I love the Fangio defense in par. It's pass defense. I really like it, and I'm biased because I love the hire because I've studied it so much. It was just easy for me from a job perspective. I worry about Fangio's run fits a little bit. I worry about the too high shell against the run. I worry about the way the NFL is going, a bit more of a power run game, and I worry about the Eagles having a below average linebacking core. And I worry about the role they're going to put on to Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter to basically be unbelievably good against the run. So I would say my concern is not with Fangio as defensive coordinator, but I'm getting a bit specific here, but Fangio's run fits in particular, and sort of the general construct of defense against the run. I can see this Eagles team getting run on a little bit. I'll do 2 for the price of 1. Another question coming in from the chat from Mr. Crockpot asking about if Devin White and the Kobe Dean are best blitzers, which 2 linebackers would you say the best at dropping back? Devin White, in my opinion, is the best in coverage, but without a doubt, I don't think it's close. And I think Eagles X's No chimed in with a chat and said the same. Then it's a fair question. I don't really know who the second one is. Like, I'm not sure you can say with confidence any of the others have particularly excelled dropping into coverage. So my answer would be Devin White and then panic stations for the next one, because I'm not sure who else. Maybe in the Kobe Dean. Yeah, there's a good comment from Eagles X's No, who just posted there about maybe Cooper DeJean as a sub linebacker. I think you could also throw in Sidney Brown there. As a sub linebacker as well as a dime safety, maybe dropping into coverage, because the Eagles haven't really got a potentially great other linebacker in coverage. Shane, I'll tell you what, the other question's a bit more fun. So I'm going to skip 9 and go straight to 10, because I think 9's a bit more of a fun question. And then we'll go on to like the fun questions afterwards. This is probably the last, let's say, serious one. What is your opinion of Nick Sirianni as a coach? And this, by the way, a nice, like, easy one to try and be concise about. I believe he's a uniter, but a simplistic X's and O's coach. How can you stay competitive if when Moore leaves to become a head coach? Fantastic question and brilliant phrasing, because basically that's sort of my answer as well. I love Nick Sirianni culture-wise, and I do think culture matters, by the way. Like, it's not all, I mean, we're an X's and O's podcasts, but it is not all X's and O's. Anyone that thinks that is kidding themselves. Like, yes, scheme matters, but oh my goodness, culture matters, and relationships matter, and working with different people and getting different people to communicate with each other. And like, that stuff is massive in sports. I mean, anyone, I can go into an NFL team tomorrow and say, this is how outside zone works. Like, don't get me wrong. But there's other stuff than just, if everyone could just copy Shanahan's offense, they just literally take the playbook and run it. Like, it doesn't work that way. Eagles Eric Snow stole one of my answers there. Dan Campbell, John Harbour. Jim Harbour, like, it's not just about X's and O's. So the big problem, I really think Nick Sirianni does struggle with the X's and O's. I think there's no doubt about that.
Can I say
think
something
he's a
real
good
fast?
coach. Yes, go for it.
Before we hold Campbell up, he had to reverse a really bad culture, which Nick Sirianni didn't have to do. Also, I wouldn't pass judgment on that until we see him try to make it work after Ben Johnson leaves and they've paid Jared Goff. So I agree. Like, you can have success there. It's the question for me is about sustained success, which Jim Harbaugh is Ravens, right? I always get them mixed up. Anyways, he's obviously been able to do, but I just wanted to address those real quick. So go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Unless I'm going absolutely mental. Someone in the chat saved me. John is the Ravens and Jim is the new guy, right?
Yeah,
with the LA,
the Chargers.
They're both very similar, I guess, in terms of culture guys, should we say. I think he's a really tricky one, because the problem is a lot of these X's and O's dweebs like us, Shane, don't make good head coaches. So you don't want, like, the X's and O's, like, who's the Dolphins guy? My mind's gone blank. Mike McDaniel.
Mike McDaniel. Or McDonald.
Why are we terrible with names today? Chat's going to love this. People listening are going to absolutely crack up.
Mike McDaniel, which is he's one of my favorite guys to listen to.
Yeah, see, but he's a classic, like, X's and O's guy, yet he's managed to make it work. Like, he's managed to be a head coach, and he's actually quite a good culture guy as well when I hear him talk. So I worry. Basically, you hit the nail on the head. The problem with having a culture guy is that if Kellen Moore's awesome, he's going to leave. But also, like, that means maybe you have to be a bit, like, cautious about who you hire as well. So Kellen Moore might need a couple of years to prove he's a good OC, because I wouldn't hire him immediately as a head coach because it hasn't worked in the past, or he's never really taken that step up. Vic Fangio didn't work, for example, as a head coach, so he's quite a safe DC, because I don't really worry about Vic Fangio leaving anytime soon. So, like, I think you can make it work if you do it in a sensible way. But I agree that, like, there is a concern. I like Sirianni, but I'd be lying if I said that, like, if the season doesn't go well, he's the first guy that gets canned. And I do think there is a legitimate situation where if Kellen Moore is absolutely awesome, like, you fire Sirianni and promote Moore, but I think that very, very rarely works. What about you, Shane? Anything else you wanted to add on Sirianni there? And then we'll get to some maybe more, some Eagles, some non-Eagles sort of stupid stuff.
Yeah, this may come back to bite me, but I was on the record last year that I would have moved on from Nick Sirianni after last season. I fall pretty firmly in the camp that head coaches should call plays for the sake of continuity when you lose offensive coordinators. Or if they don't, they should be a really good scheme person who is like designing the game plan, and they're just not the one actually calling plays. So when that play caller changes, you've still got the guy scheming everything up. Sirianni's neither of those things. He's not a play caller. And I think we've seen over last year what his scheme is, and it was horrendous. So Sirianni is neither of those guys. And if you're going to be a quote unquote culture guy, which we mentioned, there's successful examples of that, then the culture shouldn't suck as badly as it did last year. And so I don't know what you bring to the table if you're the culture guy, but your team can collapse like that and all that can happen around you. I don't know what you bring to the table in that regard. Now, the players obviously seem to love Sirianni, regardless of, the bill of sale that WIP tries to get you about Hurts not liking Sirianni and things like that. They seem to respect Sirianni. And so, obviously there's something there. You had players speaking out, defending him last year when they very easily, if they didn't like him, could have made that known and he would have been gone. And so there is an element of the culture that's hard to quantify because we can't see it, but it's certainly there in the background. That said, I want my head coach to be a schematic guy on one side of the ball or the other, and I don't really think he is.
Yeah, I think we both agree big picture, don't we? That was the last serious question, partly because it's edging closer to one of those long old shows, and I can feel the belly rumbling, and we've got some good silly questions here. Actually, one more Eagles question, but it's, I guess, an old school one from @4from24. Ignoring personalities, AJ Brown or T.O. I'm too young, and I wasn't watching the NFL properly. I say I'm too young. I mean, I was alive, obviously, during the T.O. era. I just wasn't watching football in the UK. So I've watched all of the video highlights. I've watched the 2004 season with DVD and stuff. I've been reliving it just now with John Stolnis' Eagle Memories. And I have to say that from everything I see, it's Terrell Owens, isn't it? Am I wrong?
That's a little early. I mean, I was watching football, but I was like 13, so I was watching football from a different perspective. And there's recency bias that probably goes in as well. Definitely go check out Eagles Memories because that's been fun to relive the 2004 season with John. So check that out on this feed. But I went back and looked at some of the stats, and A.J. Brown's had the much faster start to his career. In his first 4 years, Terrell Owens only topped 1,000 yards one time. Brown has done it 4 times in 5 years, including back-to-back 1,400-yard seasons. Now, the league has obviously changed in that time, for sure. Owens was taller than Owens was taller than A.J. Brown by almost 2.5 inches, but Brown is heavier and faster. I think... And again, this is not the best question for me to answer, but I think I would take Brown. But I mean, you'd take either one of these guys.
Interesting. Yeah, I have one of my dreams. Actually, one of my dreams. That's not the word I wanted to use. One of the things I'd like to do is just like a historical account on Twitter, but that's like old football film. And I want to try and get the all 22 of the 2004 season. It's going to be a project of me next year. I might end up emailing very random people in the world to try and get if anyone's listening who happens to have the all 22 saved on like a G drive, let me know. Because I'd like to go and watch some of that 2004 season to watch a little bit of McNabb and Terrell Owens. I think I'd take T.O. as someone who's only ever watched highlights for him. I like how these are the fun questions, and Shane starts talking about stats at his height. Like, once a nerd, always a nerd. Like, it's meant to just be a little bit of fun. Like, AJ, and all of a sudden, 2.5 inches bigger. I'm just talking about, like, YouTube highlights I've watched. And I'm taking Terrell Owens. Right, what else have we got? Now, I'll tell you what, let's do the is there any more Eagles questions we've got in the chat very, very quickly? Because then we'll get to... I can see one final Eagles one. Chances that Kellen Moore becomes Eagles head coach in 2025. I'm going low because as much as I said it happens, it very, very rarely works. I think it's very controversial. And it sort of means the offense did well as well and Sirianni still lost his job. So I'd go like 1 in 100, 1%. I think it's very, very unlikely. Would you agree?
Yeah, the number I had in mind was 2%. I don't see how the team does poorly enough to fire Sirianni and yet good enough to retain Kellen Moore and promote him. So I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, it'd be pretty tough. Right, we're going to go non-Eagles now very quickly. Let's start with. I'm just looking at the list. Let's do the football one before we go non-football. I did actually have to think about this way too much, and I've got I've got maybe a couple of answers. The NFL decides to restart a fantasy draft, but excludes QBs from the draft. You have the 1 overall pick. Who are you taking? And if you're in the chat, please put your answers in there as well. I want you to start because I'm nervous about this one. So, who are you taking number 1 overall in a fantasy draft with no? And I take it, by the way, this means like it's not a fantasy. This means real football, right? So you can take defensive players, offensive players.
Correct,
who are you taking in the draft, number 1 overall with no QBs?
Yeah, fantasy draft is just like everybody's in a draft pool to draft from, excluding quarterbacks. I actually kind of wanted you to go first because I think there's only 4 answers that are acceptable. And I was hoping you would pick one that was not on my list of 4 so I can yell at you about it. But
so do you want to hear the top 2 that came to my mind straight away then?
Yes.
The top 2 were Justin Jefferson.
Okay, you're good there.
And Micah Parsons.
You're good there. Those are both on my list of 4.
Okay, then I sort of wanted to selfishly say Jalen Carter, but I think it's too early for that, so I didn't put him in there. But I don't think he's miles away. I'll be honest, I'm rubbish at names around the league, so I was looking at some of the best offensive linemen. Is one of yours an offensive tackle by any chance?
Yes.
And is it the Bucks guy?
No.
Is it? Who's the other young offensive tackle that everyone talks about? Who's your offensive tackle? Yes, that was the one I had. I promise you.
Tristan Wirfs also very good. You could make an argument for Wirfs. I like Sewell.
Yeah, I see Mr. Crockpot put Sauce Gardner in there. I didn't count him because I just can't take a corner.
That's my 4th.
Is he your 4th? I just can't do it. I'm burned too much of secondary play. I think it's too inconsistent. I want a pass rusher. It's a horrible answer. Mine might be Micah Parsons. I just think Parsons is unbelievable, and it's also a horrible answer for Eagles fans because they could have had him. And I called him a slot only receiver, and I deserve all the hate I get because I was wrong about Justin Jefferson playing outside. I think I might take Justin Jefferson, like as wild as it sounds, take a receiver. I just think he's unbelievable. And mine would be Jefferson or Parsons. So you've given us your 4, but if you had to take one, who would your 1 be if you had to take one?
I think I'm taking Sauce Gardner.
Wow, that's a terrible take. You're taking Sauce over. No, I think I take Jalen Carter over Sauce Gardner. Honestly, I think I take Jalen Carter over him.
He's only 23 years old. Cornerback is probably the most unstable position in football year to year, and Sauce Gardner is ranked 1st and 2nd in yards allowed per coverage snap in back-to-back seasons, and that just doesn't happen.
Is he that good?
And he's also like, if you get into the advanced analytics for like, they do the graphs of like separation allowed and catch point metrics, and he's been at like the top of all of those in back-to-back seasons. So
right,
I think if you could, and so my thought is getting an elite corner is hard. Getting an elite corner that is consistent year over year, that just doesn't happen. There's those ebbs and flows. And I look at the other guys like Justin Jefferson, and he's phenomenal, but there's such a glut of wide receiver talent. Like, I think you can go get wide receivers. We see wide receivers get drafted and contribute right away, even though, obviously not at Justin Jefferson's level. Micah Parsons, like, a lot of me wants to go pass rusher. Myles Garrett, I saw Eagles Eric mention, but he's 28, and that's a little older than what I want to start my franchise around. And so I think for me, I would probably go Sauce Gardner 1, and I think Penei Sewell would be my number 2.
I think Sauce Gardner over Micah Parsons is a horrible, horrible take. But there you go. We don't disagree much. Carl Hamilton's an interesting shout, but yeah, in Madden he's worse than Kevin Byard, so you wouldn't want him because Kevin Byard is actually better than Carl Hamilton. And you're now going to tweet that as a clip as well, so I'm going to stop talking. Let's move on to non-Eagles ones then, totally random. So if you don't like us talking about anything but football, just turn off the last 4 minutes of the pod. We'll rush through these very quickly. But we've done a hell of a lot of Eagles NFL talk. I'm interested to see this, Shane, because we don't talk anything about football because we're boring people. We talk a little bit off air, obviously. We're not just football friends, I guess. We talk a little bit about life, about like culture. So Mount Rushmore of TV shows, and I'm going to embarrass myself here and just clarify that Mount Rushmore is 4. It's like the 4 heads, isn't it?
Yes,
I'm correct.
Yes,
as the Brit.
That's a bit of a cultural question here. So good job, Johnny, on that one. It's 4. So give me 4 of your favorite TV shows.
So I actually think 3 of them set in America, possibly. I would go. So I think my top 4, mine are all probably quite serious. Like I like funny shows, like everyone, but I'd probably go a bit more serious. I would go The Wire, number 1. No, that is set in Baltimore. Breaking Bad, number 2. That is also set, isn't it, in the States somewhere? Breaking Bad. It's like about Mexico and Mexican Kyle, isn't it? Yep. Number 3, Homeland. Is a lot of like CIA involved. Like the first few series are unbelievable. Then it just goes total nonsense. But I love the first 3 episodes. Like I love Damian Lewis.
The first season of Homeland is maybe the best TV show I've ever watched.
Unbelievable. Then it went.
I also never finished Homeland because it became rubbish.
It's utterly awful. But I had to watch it because I love her, the main character. She's brilliant. Just a complete car crash of a human by the end of it. Just doesn't know what the hell is going on. Like it's fantastic. And then the last one, it's not. I think I have to put it in there because it's just. I was stuck between 2. I was stuck between Lost, which was an old school TV show I watched years ago with these like survivors. There's a plane crash. If I had 5, but apparently this Mount Rushmore thing has 4. So I'm going to go with Game of Thrones. Bit like cliche, bit traditional, but I love Game of Thrones. I haven't watched Ted Lasso, by the way, Mr. Crockpot. So I went. So my 4, if you're keeping track at home, The Wire, Breaking Bad, Homeland, and Game of Thrones. Where are you going, Shane?
3 for 4 with Mr. Crockpot here.
Yeah, I know. Good taste.
Hot
very
take.
Good taste.
The last season of Ted Lasso ruined the whole series. It was
wow.
Awful. I thought the last season.
Ted Lasso now.
I loved Ted Lasso until the last season, and I thought it was quite bad there. But
yeah, just quickly, this is a bit of a depressing culture take, but like I used to watch way more TV before I did this as a second job. Like I used to actually watch a lot more just fun stuff in the evenings rather than grinding like the Eagles All 22 on a Tuesday evening. But me and my wife do try and still watch a bit of TV here and there when I'm not constantly watching sports. So I watch less TV than I ever used to. But those are some really good programs. Yep.
I'll go. So Breaking Bad is one of mine. Parks and Rec is up there. Sitcom show. Similar like style of humor to like the American version of The Office. But I like Parks and Rec a lot. For its pure longevity and the fact I've literally been watching the show almost my entire life, I'm going to go with Survivor. It's had like 45 seasons, 2 seasons a year. The show first came out when I was in 6th grade, and I remember like every Friday we would always sit around and talk about it at lunch because it aired on Thursday nights. And like I've watched every season, applied to be on the show multiple times. Never get those callbacks because I'm not interesting enough, I guess. But if there's any CBS executives out there, put me on Survivor. It'll be great. And then for my last one, I don't know if it counts or not because it's technically a mini series. It's only like, I think it's 8 or maybe it's 12 episodes, but Band of Brothers. Have you ever watched Band of Brothers? So if Band of Brothers counts, that's definitely on my Mount Rushmore. If Band of Brothers doesn't count, then Lost is probably my 4th one, or maybe like 24, although it tailed off in the later seasons too, but I loved 24. So depending on the ruling from the internet people about Band of Brothers, I have Breaking Bad, Parks and Rec, Survivor, and Band of Brothers is my Mount Rushmore.
We're actually quite similar culturally. More shout-outs in the chat. The chat is too much for me to keep up with. But Mindhunters, I couldn't believe Netflix cancelled it. I'm like every white male in their late 20s who loves like crime podcasts and crime shows. Like True Detective's another one. Like I'm like every one of that genre. I'm like every cliche about a man my age that likes a crime podcast. Yeah, Mindhunters was absolutely brilliant. Right, let's move on from TV shows before this becomes a purely TV mailbag. 2 more, but only 1 more for you, Shane, because the last one's all me. What is your favorite Olympic event to watch? Which is a good question because the Olympics are on. Hot take, I don't care. Now, not I don't care about the Olympics. I love the Olympics. My hot take is I don't care about the event. Like, basically, the Olympics to me is like background music. And that sounds terrible because there's like elite athletes. And I think you Americans like it more than us over here, probably because you've got too many people, so you win everything. It's not really a fair race when you've got more people than we do. But anyway, so my Olympic event is like, I'm in a pub, which we'll come on to in a minute. Like, I'm having a drink, having a music. Like, there's just Olympics on in the background. Like, that's my dream. Like, I don't really want to get invested. Like, obviously the 100 meters is great, but like, I would watch anything. Like, literally stick anything on them. I've got a drink. It's in the background. I'm talking to mates, and the Olympics. That's what the Olympics is great for. I was actually in Dublin last week in Ireland, and obviously Dublin, if anyone does not know, is known for having amazing pubs. And I was sitting there drinking a Guinness, and there was just the opening ceremony in the background on for like 3 hours, and I was like, "What is going on?" No, the opening ceremony was absolutely nuts, but it fit perfectly with the vibe in the pub. So I don't have a favorite Olympic event. There's a terrible hot take for you, Shane. There is not one event I will ever tune in for. I will just put on the TV, and if it's on, then it is on. You seem disgusted with that take. So what that's fine. What is your favorite Olympic event?
As long as you said it didn't matter because you just watch them. If you were just like, the Olympics are dumb, then I would have been offended. For me, it's men's indoor volleyball. I played club volleyball throughout college, and there's not a lot of times you get to watch like indoor volleyball outside of the Olympics. So I always enjoy watching that. The kids have been sick, so we've been laying on the couch and watching a lot of the Olympics the last few days. And I mean, we've watched everything: swimming, diving, track and field, gymnastics. Like, each kid kind of has their own favorites, but they all have gotten into the volleyball because I can explain to them what's happening. So we watched the U.S. men beat, spoiler alert, Brazil yesterday in the quarterfinals. They play Poland tomorrow in the semifinals, and we've like got the alarm set for that to make sure we don't miss the start. So I will watch literally anything on the Olympics, but men's volleyball is my sweet spot.
All right, you're way more into it than me. You are way more into it than me. Yeah, that's also the most like white man answer I've ever heard is men's looking like cliche, but that's even worse. Anyway, right, let's finish. That was good fun. I'm going to end with one last question, which was an incredibly good question. So shout out Angry Kook on Twitter, who tweeted that said, when people buy you a beer on your page, what pub is your favorite? And full disclaimer, for about 2 years, I've had like a buy me a coffee or buy me a beer thing pinned to my Twitter. It's almost like a little donation, I guess, if people don't want to subscribe. I mean, I've never had subscription until we've launched Patreon. I've always been sort of working for Bleeding Green. But if anyone wanted to say thank you and buy me a beer, I withdrew some funds, and it was contributed to my beer funds in Dublin last week, which was awesome. And he said, we were in England last summer. We like the look of a lot of pubs, but after a few, we realized that many were either part of Green King or Fuller's, and we had to look for independent ones. This is a great shout because the UK beer scene is really good. Like, I love an English pub. I'm very British. I spend a lot of my time just chilling in pubs. I'll go to pubs solo and just like work there. Like, but there are Green King and Fuller's are taking over, and it's a shame. So independent pubs. I'll rattle through this in like 30 seconds. Shame if anyone's ever coming over to the UK. And I know some people do. I've actually met a friend of the show who's come over to the UK once before. So if you do ever come over on business, let me know. I'll give you some recommendations. A couple of ones that I love. So I have a set for London. I don't know if this is not the same in America and Canada because I've been to both. And people always sit down in American and Canadian pubs when I was there. Whereas in London, we like to stand outside in the freezing cold of our beer. Like, standing outside the pub and freezing is like the traditional British way. So if you want to stand outside and have a beer, the Neil Gwyn is brilliant for that. It's like a very traditional English pub. It stinks of like, it's like down the little side of a near Covent Garden. It's down like a little, you can smell like the drains, and it's proper like tiny, but it's really cool. If you want to stand out overlooking the River Thames, the Horniman, great name as well, in London Bridge is class because you can stand outside and overlook the Thames. History teacher here, history buff, Prospect Whitby in Wapping is about 1520, I think the pub began. And if you sit outside and have a drink over the river, there's also like a noose. There's like a fake noose hanging out over the beach as if someone's about to get hanged, which is pretty cool. They're 3 cool recommendations. I live with my 2 favorite pubs in London, though. The Porterhouse near Charing Cross or Covent Garden is just an awesome pub. MC and Sons is a brilliant Irish pub as well. And I'll give a very random shout out. If you ever want to have a little bit of fun, there is something, Shane, called the Bermondsey Beer Mile, which is basically in Bermondsey, which is like a little bit of a hipster part of London. And you can essentially do, I don't know how many pubs, actually, I can't remember, which is a sign of a good night, the Bermondsey Beer Mile. But there is, I'm Googling it frantically now, there is like a number of different pubs. I think there's about 13 or so pubs all along a mile. And you literally start it and finish it along the mile. It's a straight line. And they're all like very hipster pubs with loads of different great craft beer. So if you ever want a very good night in London, it's a little bit different. To the Bermondsey Beer Mile, you will not regret it. So we'll finish our mailbag there, Shane. Anyone coming over to the London has ever been before, please tweet me your recommendations. I'm very British. I like hearing it when you lot come over to visit. But yeah, there's some good independent pubs if you are in the region anytime soon.
All right. Well, there you have it, our mailbag. Johnny, we made it through the off season. The next time the people hear our voices,
wow,
all 22, as long as it works, we'll be doing an all 22 film breakdown from the preseason, assuming we're able to get our hands on the footage. With the Eagles have their first game on Friday night. We'll be back next week to break down what we saw from all 22. Hopefully, if not, we'll just have to talk generally from broadcast copy, but we'll see what we're able to get to. Thank you guys for tuning in to the show. If you are not following us on Patreon and you would like to, you can check that out at patreon.com/ontheshanepage. There is a $3 and a $5 tier. And again, it gets you an ad-free podcast feed for this show. It also gets you access to a Discord, access to these mailbags once they go Patreon exclusive later this year. You'll get to vote in player spotlight polls. Regardless, if you don't want to do that, you can still support us and get all of our content absolutely for free by subscribing to the Eagles Pinpool Network. We have 6 shows that will be airing each week as the season starts. We will have a live post-game show after the game on Friday night that'll go out on Twitter and YouTube. It'll post in this podcast feed. And then our 6th show will be the Armchair Scouts, which will start near the end of the month of August alongside the college football season. So there's something for everybody, whether you're a film nerd, whether you're a football noob, we've got you covered with all the stuff. So be sure you check that out. Leave us 5-star ratings and reviews. We really appreciate it. And we will catch you guys next week when we actually have preseason football film to talk about. Till next time, go Birds.